Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be going over a topic, but I will also be overlaying the creation of a painting on top of it. So if you want to watch, great, it's there for that. And if you just want to sit back and listen, then that's fine as well. I've created this so that you can kind of enjoy it both ways, whether just audio or if you want some visuals and just to watch a painting come to life. But either way, let's hop right in. Today, I have 3 tips for you to achieve better realism. Now, let's start off with some disclaimers because, again, this is directed towards realistic painters. If you're not a realistic painter and you do any other style, you're still an artist, you're still phenomenal, but this is for those who are, in fact, trying to achieve that realistic look. And it's not included in my tips because I think it kind of goes without saying. This is with the understanding that you are working towards, if not achieved, the ability to have correct proportions. Having correct proportions already sets you 85% ahead than anyone else. So working on your drawing and working on those hand-eye coordination skills to be able to get those accurate proportions is really going to be a monumental part of achieving a realistic look. Now, if you want to practice your drawing and proportion skills, I do have a course called the Self-Taught Artist Curriculum that is on my Patreon where we go through endless amounts of drawing and painting exercises. It is in the process of, being built, but at this point I do have a lot on there and there's going to be forever more to come for you guys. So if you want more practice, make sure to check that out. That link is in the description box below. Now let's get into kind of the more nuanced tip. So my first tip for you is going to be edge control. I've said this before on this channel, I'll say it again, and I will emphasize it with the same amount of importance because it is that important. Being able to control your edges, to me, is the difference between a beginner, intermediate, and an advanced, masterful artist. Now, why is that? I think when we first start painting, we are so enamored with this idea of color and proportion, and we're trying to learn all of these things that it's very easy to think and fall into the trap of color being the most important thing. And while yes, it is very important, and we actually talk about it in tip number 2. The reason edge control is so important is because of what it does to your paintings. For example, if you're painting a landscape, the difference between a beginner and a master artist is going to be that edge control that tells you something is disappearing or back in the atmosphere. If you're drawing something or painting something as simple as a circle, the ability to really show that disappearing edge and that turn of the subject and shape by having hard edges and disappearing edges, it really just elevates your art. On top of the fact that edge control is really where our own voices start to come in. So what makes us different than a photograph? And ultimately, to me, that comes down to edge control and where we choose to put in these disappearing or lost and found edges to be able to draw focal points or detract from some details or anything. This is just really where our own voice comes in and where we have so much power. I learned this when I was studying a lot of Russian artists because they put such an emphasis on this, on taking an image, taking something that everyone else in the room is looking at, but choosing to kind of manipulate it in your own way by, say, taking a face and choosing to focus on the nose or the ear instead of, everything all at once. This control and these decisions allows you so much voice, but it ultimately basically demonstrates your understanding of what's happening in the world. You understand that this part of the anatomy, because of where the light is, there is going to be less detail, or if you do see detail, there doesn't need to be detail there because there are other things that you want to draw attention to, being able to manipulate that and make those decisions to lessen detail and soften those edges, therefore pushing it further in space and kind of drawing less attention to it in contrast to those hard edges, high contrasts with a lot of detail that are really going to be drawing your attention, and that's going to become your focal point. That is what our world is made of. That is what makes you different and better than a photograph. And that is what makes you different from other artists, is how, when, and where you choose to invoke this edge control. So that's tip number one. It was a lofty one, but once you learn more about this and kind of practice it more, it really elevates your sense of realism. Tip number two is value compression. So I had kind of just slipped up a little bit and talked a little bit about it in the first tip. One of the things that I see a lot of beginners do, and I was guilty of myself, is thinking that there are more changes and that there's more diversity in your values than there actually is. So, better way to say it, we tend to exaggerate. And so where does this kind of show up? One of the ways, kind of outright and easy to identify, is in shadows. Beginners oftentimes tend to put way too many values in their shadows, and when you do that, it creates a very flat looking image, especially when in comparison to a light side that also has a lot of changes. So when I say and speak of value compression, what I'm talking about is, your value scale is this big. I'm talking about when you're working in shadows, remembering that that's 5 to 9 or 1 to 5, whichever way you do it. I always have 1 is white and 9 is dark. So you're working 5 to 9, and instead of necessarily using all of those, compressing it even further. Most of your values are going to be actually closer to that mid-range value. Now, you might have one outlier for like a really dark shadow that is used on like 3 little spots. Most of your values are compressed in that middle shadow range, and you just have that one outlier, and that compression really gives like a softness and a sense of realism. Same goes for your lights. If there are too many lights and too many value shifts in your lights, it's going to become flat really quickly. Keep them compressed, keep them separate, and work on a very small scale. Because the other thing people run into is the more that you stare at an image, the more your brain convinces you that there is more contrast there than there actually is. This is why it's so important to do things like squint or step back or leave the room and then come back and look at your painting from afar. Anything to kind of distort the way that you're looking at it and change the way that your brain has gotten used to can really reset you and allow you to kind of objectively look back at those things. And just try to remember that that is something your brain will always try to do. No matter if you're a beginner or a master, your brain will always convince you that there are more changes and more nuances there than there actually is. And it's our job to subdue that and control that and demonstrate our discipline over that. And that will really help us achieve this next level sense of realism. So, value compression, very important. My last tip to you is actually also in relation to value, because it is that important. So whereas the last tip was about value compression and keeping things close, this one is about understanding value as a whole and being able to just see and identify values. Because at least in my own journey and things that I see in other artists, the difference between those that kind of have that old master, elegant quality to their paintings versus kind of more stampy or childlike is their understanding of value. So why do Andrew Tischler's paintings look so outrageously realistic and beautiful, like you could just step into them? Well, one, he's a master. Whether he would call himself that or not, we'll call him that for him. He is a master, and he's just really good and understands all these tips of what creates a realistic painting. But one of the things that he is phenomenal at is this understanding of value and getting these values put down correctly the first time. And so you see him kind of develop a painting, and I do it a very similar way, where you tackle broad shapes, far off things, and then you slowly kind of move forward, add more detail, you kind of hone in more on your focal point. And doing it this way allows you to get a very good map out of your values, so you can immediately see if something is off from the get-go. But back to value itself, being able to really hone in on the value of a far-off mountain versus a close-up tree, or value of the form turning on a horse based off of what lighting it's in. Creating a rose that really pops and feels like, you know, it's there to touch. That really honestly just comes down to the values that people chose, and the way that those values relate to each other tells you how far back something is and how close something is. Now, there are things you can use, like you can use value scales with a hole punch taken out of it, where you kind of like hold that up to your colors or your reference image so you can double check that you are in fact working in the same value range. You can use things like color checkers. You can take a photo of your image, turn it black and white, and do the same with your painting and kind of compare and contrast. So irrelevant of color, it's the value of these colors that we're working with, and making sure that those really go in the right places, tell the story of atmosphere, depth, dimension, shape, and turning of forms. So again, last tip is just understanding values as a whole and getting those put down as accurately as possible the first time around. Okay, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, if there's something that you have specific questions on or you want to see a video on, please leave that in the comments below. I'm more than happy to tackle what interests you guys the most. Also, I am sick. I'm coming off of being sick. So if I've sounded nasally this entire video, that's why. And I do apologize. Hopefully the next one, you won't hear that. But again, yeah, in the comments, please let me know what you like, don't like, what you're interested in learning about, what you want to see more of. I make a note of all of them, and I, put them on the roster for videos to come up. And I wish you the best of luck in achieving your realistic painting goals. I'm gonna go drink some tea and probably go to sleep so that I can continue to start to feel better. But all the links for any supplies, for my website, art for sale, and for my Patreon, where I teach you even more and give you tons of exercises and behind the scenes stuff, tips and tricks. All of that can be found in the description box below. Check it out if you're interested. And as always, thank you so much for joining, and I can't wait to see you in the next one, when I won't be sick and nasally.